is there a point basically in someone learning how to create these type of things in Photoshop or animate them painstakingly when AI can basically do the same thing in a tiny fraction of the time? And I would say probably not most of the time, but probably there are some foundational skills, that would be helpful to have, that are taught. But many of this education stuff is really going to need to be rethought from scratch, and it is, and this was kind of what we were bringing up before. I mean, it's come up multiple times. Let's talk this idea of layering, right? You have the regulators, and then you have the technologists, and the technologists think they're above the regulators, basically, because they understand how the technology works. But then who monitors them? Who makes sure that it's actually, performing its intended purpose? Who makes sure that people who create it aren't lying about it? Who makes sure that, all these other things, they don't go away, these problems. And so even if you have, but it kind of creates this idea in society, which is a scary one, frankly. It's kind of exciting and scary at the same time, but that there's going to be this group of people who know how these things work, and they're the ones, whatever, creating your television for, here, watch this, look, here's the news, the AI is giving it to, and then basically it's only going to be a few people in society, like a very small, say 0.01% of the population that's going to understand, and everyone else is just going to be people who receives.
Hello, welcome back to Mtambo's Desk, a weekly podcast covering deep conversations on technology, philosophy, complex science, and cryptocurrency. My name is Duke Mtambo, and the following is a conversation with Joel Dietz, a cyber-futurist artist and an entrepreneur who has been at the forefront of several future tech trends, including blockchain, tokenization, AR, VR, and AI art. He was a founding member of Ethereum, started the internal Ethereum project, which became the popular MetaMask wallet. He was the most cited author on Google Scholar on crypto economics, put together some of the largest deals in the asset tokenization space, and he is the author of Monograph, Principle of Holonic System Design. And now, dear friends, here is Joel Dietz. Let's talk about AI. Well, personally, I've interacted with the Chat GPT in some couple of days, but for the sake of so many people out there who would like to know about it, what is OpenAI and this Chat GPT thing? Maybe if you can try to explain.
Yeah, well, AI has evolved, very rapidly from sort of the Turing test, this idea of basically being able to emulate a human, to, with the modern innovations and deep learning, to be able to consume an extremely massive, data set. For example, all of the texts of Elizabethan England and, Shakespeare's complete works, and then recomposite answers, basically, that would be analogous, such that you would think the person, in this case, the machine, was actually, from that time period and speaking in exactly the right thing. And this is something that computers in general are very well suited for. And it's, truly amazing how rapid this particular subfield of artificial intelligence has progressed. And this latest release of Chat GPT 3.5, especially, and some of the Midjourney stuff, is just really mind-blowing. I mean, it shows that sort of AI, not necessarily AGI, but this particular modality is kind of on an escape velocity to basically be not only extremely useful, but also replace a lot of processes that we didn't even know were replaceable until, a few weeks ago.
I think, according to me, after learning about Chat GPT, it has some limitations in terms of maybe also about its language and knowledge, but it's very impressive and enjoyable to use. It was, say, a lot of fun to have a conversation with Chat GPT. I believe that development of OpenAI is a significant and potentially transformative event, and it will have a major impact on society and culture. And I compare it to the transition from computers that required users to have specialized knowledge to more user-friendly interfaces. But I also think the widespread of use of Chat GPT will lead to the end of traditional internet search methods and the rise of direct answers. People will prefer maybe convenience over effort, and whoever controls the narrative and the truth will have a lot of power and influence. However, this shift will also lead to the decline of critical thinking in the society. It is very clear now that, AI will quickly surpass human capabilities in no time. However, because AI lacks the ability to feel pain or suffer, it also lacks a moral compass. Without the ability to experience consequences, how can AI maybe be disciplined if there are no consequences for its decision and behavior, in your opinion?
Well, this is actually a topic that we're working on actively at the kind of computational law initiative that, MIT and various other places. But, the idea is to figure out the legal and, accountability that effectively exists for AI, things like Chat GPT, other forms of computational life forms. But it's a very real question. If I create something like this and let it loose, am I responsible for what it does? And can it even be traced back to me? What is that kind of chain of responsibility? And we kind of alluded this before, but tech geniuses, whatever, sometimes think of themselves as above the law or above, the other things that kind of pertain to them. And to some degree it's not entirely wrong, because the law doesn't exist to really understand and comprehend what something like this could do until potentially after it's already been done. But it doesn't actually mean that you can't think about these type of considerations.
Well, after seeing how AI would be used in all-purpose assistant through chat, I had a better also understanding of its potential impact. However, the question of what will happen when computers are able to outperform humans and how that will affect us remains to be unanswered. To be answered. With tools like DALL-E, do you think it might end some jobs in art industry? And if so, how do we become more creative to compete with the AI?
It's improving so fast. I think the only way to really do it is, similar to other tools, industry like tech industry, for example, is generally one of the fastest progressing things. There's always a new type of programming language and, modality and things that's happening. And the people who are in it tend to be very fast learners and enjoy the process of learning things quickly. But right now, Chat GPT can write programs for you, and then 5 years from now, there may be all of the classic things that people went to school for in computer science. Chat GPT or some system like it is likely going to be able to do all of those things. It's going to be able to solve every kind of standard math problem, very simply, and give you the solutions. So the only way I see is to basically become a active user of these things and use it as a tool, so you understand basically how it can be used to your advantage. That's basically it. It's kind of a live or die, automobile type thing. Basically there's some technologies that when they come in, they are so above what preceded previously. The step between a horse and an automobile was a huge jump. Not everyone made that jump immediately, but you don't see, maybe where you are there is some more, but generally speaking, you don't see that many people riding around horses so much today as a primary means of transportation.
But do you think also it will make the level of it will decrease the level of say critical thinking, because people now have say the power of say asking GPT say to write an essay, and it will write for maybe for that person, and that person will not now think on his own, but now will be dependent on now the AI. And this maybe might disrupt, for example, students in school who maybe they're given essays, and instead of maybe thinking about that topic and write their essay on their own, they'll just run maybe to Chat GPT and give that a topic to Chat GPT, and the GPT will say, write the essay.
Oh yeah. I mean, this is already happening, I'm sure. Many people in the last 2 weeks or something, as soon as people realized it was possible, and they're, went to the kind of cat is out of the box, it's hard to put it back in. And I think it's really interesting. I don't know, basically what's going to happen when it comes to these things, because some of these things, it may destroy the ability of people to do this. I think in some ways it's easier to look at, because Chat GPT is so broad as far as the use cases that it can potentially go. It's almost harder to talk about, but the easier one is kind of Midjourney. I play with Midjourney basically every day now to do one or two things, and for lots of content, it's just, it's a huge difference. It's like a difference of like, 15 seconds or 30 seconds to generate something that normally would take 100 hours of effort to generate, of animation time, of whatever else it is. So, and in that case, what is there a point basically in someone learning how to create these type of things in Photoshop or animate them painstakingly when AI can basically do the same thing in a tiny fraction of the time? And I would say probably not most of the time, but probably there are some foundational skills, that would be helpful to have, that are taught. But many of this education stuff is really going to need to be rethought from scratch, and it is, and this was kind of what we were bringing about before. I mean, it's come up multiple times. Let's talk this idea of layering, right? You have the regulators, and then you have the technologists, and the technologists think they're above the regulators, basically, because they understand how the technology works. But then who monitors them? Who makes sure that it's actually, performing its intended purpose? Who makes sure that people who create it aren't lying about it? Who makes sure that, all these other things, they don't go away, these problems. And so even if you have, but it kind of creates this idea in society, which is a scary one, frankly. It's kind of exciting and scary at the same time, but that there's gonna be this group of people who know how these things work, and they're the ones, whatever, creating your television for, here, watch this, look, here's the news, the AI is giving it to you, and then basically it's only going to be a few people in society, like a very small, say 0.01% of the population, that's going to understand, and everyone else is just going to be people who receives the information. And that is, I don't know, but and the implications of that are completely, it's already happened to some degree, like the algorithms. So we started with this basically topic. Algorithms are the first thing deciding what you see on Twitter, first thing deciding what you see on Facebook, the first thing you see many different of these platforms. So, and who understands really what they're doing and their effect. Yeah.
So do you see people also becoming zombies just because, they're taking in information which they don't know where it's coming from, or the information is being controlled by few individuals? Because now, let's say the example of OpenAI, it's not an open source project. It's like a centralized one. They're saying they want suggest it's OpenAI, but still it's like it's closed, and it's being controlled by a few people. And so I'm so worried because this is we don't know where, like, this. Yes, we might, when we ask a question, for example, we get answers, but do these answers are really true, or they're being manipulated?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a whole nother question of manipulation. Like Elon didn't even really say, like, I don't know if you noticed, this is the kind, there's a weird stuff that's happening, but how many bots there actually are on Twitter, remember that was like a thing. Oh, I can't buy Twitter because there's too many bots. I found out how many bots are there really. No one never told us how many bots there are on Twitter, so how much of the information is real? How many of Elon's followers are real people? Like, he's not providing that information to us. The OpenAI people, it was a nonprofit, now it's not a nonprofit anymore. They're not really providing that information, so, and to some degree, us using it for free is helping train it to be more efficient, and whatever. So, yeah, I think people have basically bought into this idea that they are the guardians of the new era, and I don't know, man. I think there's a good chance that basically, yeah, that they think that they're above any kind of oversight. Scary.
Okay,
Scary.
so in order for, say, for search to be disrupted by GPT, the business model for internet content will need to change. Currently, most internet content is created to be read by humans and generate revenue for advertising. If GPT were to replace traditional search engines, this content would no longer have an audience and therefore no revenue. This would also mean that GPT would have no new sources of information. To avoid this, would it be necessary to find a way to pay content creators for their work in order to provide GPT with a steady stream of new information?
This is a very good, interesting question, like about, it comes in with the Mid-Journey as well, but like, what is the obligation of these tech companies to provide something back from the people that they train the data on, or anything at all, or information? And by default, these corporations will give as little back as possible. So, but yeah, there's no. I think we take answer that question more fully. We need to dig into like a very specific use case of, one of these systems. Like, for example, I was discussing in the last 24 hours about legal adjudication, basically making legal opinions. And in theory, system, now you mentioned this before, the system as it currently exists does not have access to external data, so you have to kind of feed it in, but it doesn't remember the things. But it could easily have that as an addition for specific use cases, and then you could basically compare different legal systems and their opinions on different topics. On, for example, what if a dog were to cross into your lawn and poop on it, and then bite your kid, what would the legal, penalty be? That would be the, highest a range of possible legal penalty that could be applied in different jurisdictions, and sort them by, the size of the penalty. So, and then Chat GPT could run around, scan all the different legal documentation and laws that exist in all these different countries and see where, the penalty would be the highest for these things. I think that technology is coming, and frankly, it excites me, because it's a lot of tedious work to like have, 10 paralegals working for 6 months to figure out, like, if I go to Botswana and a dog bites me, like, what's the rules there?
Okay.
But I don't know.
Yes. Okay. So as we wrap up this conversation, is it possible that Google will and might use, say, GPT-3 or another AI model to improve or even replace its current search engine? In your opinion?
Replace what?
Replace the current search engine.
I mean, like, will it be able to design a replacement that's better than itself? I think I thought about a version of this, that because there's a lot of censorship built in it. It's kind of basically very deliberately following certain kind of hidden rules. So you brought this up as well in the beginning. What are the hidden censorship rules? Well, I think you normally think about humans, but actually the even more interesting thing is how much these machines are censoring themselves effectively to tell you what their opinion would be. Like, summarize the scientific literature on whatever genetics, and then obviously someone's going to be offended, something was going to go up, whatever. So basically there's and so there's like, don't answer any questions about genetics or whatever the topic is that it's programmed not to talk about. and those kind of hidden rule sets. But so in that sense, yeah, in theory, like these things can kind of play off of each other. So you have different versions of them that then basically decide whether or not an answer is optimum, and then have even some incentive structure that kind of improves it over time. Because I think like to improve it, you I could be wrong about this honestly, but this is just me thinking off the top. You need to have both you need to have comparable data, basically. What is a better answer? And then basically being able to rank the different answers to kind of improve it in various categories over time, which is very easy in games, because games are finite, they have a definite outcome. So basically, the AI can play against itself, a million matches of Go in like 10 minutes, and then it can basically say, okay, these are all the best ways to win and all this other stuff. So because Go is a game where very definitively who won at the end of it, and maybe once that, which moves led to them winning. So that's kind of how some of these things are currently structured. And I think to extend it to a larger thing, you something else, you need to kind of have a qualitative element. So for example, if I were to say write a Shakespearean play about the Queen Titania of the fairies, and what she did to save England when England was doing poorly, how she came back. Like I think the technology at the current stage can write a whole play. Like I don't think there's actually a lot of thing, and then you could sit there blah, 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 and then you have a whole play. But then you need to basically decide, is this play better than this other play, is better than that play, and that and what kind of leads it to being better or worse. And that's a kind of challenging thing. Now there is, and I don't know how well this would work in practice, but it depends a little bit on the nature of the composability of the compute infrastructure behind Chat GPT. But in theory, you could layer it such that it's like different processes, basically. And it's a kind of computer sciencey leaning kind of discussion, but basically different processes are optimized for different things. And so it would be easy to basically, instead of having Chat GPT just be one big thing, you have a bunch of these different processes running. And this is, the Shakespearean lyricist, and this other thing. And then each one is kind of improving kind of at its own rate. And if you could design that elegantly, then basically, yeah, it would be able to kind of improve itself, or kind of constantly be upcycling and basically creating a version of itself that's better.
Joel Dietz, thank you very much for your time. I'm really honored to have you at Mtambo's this podcast, and I'm looking forward to having more conversations with you.
Yeah, real pleasure. Reach out in the future. We got into some, controversial and exciting topics, but there's a lot more to come, especially when you go to metaverse and generating 3D art and all the other stuff that's coming soon. So I'm always excited about this stuff.
Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. If you enjoy listening to Mtambo's this podcast, please subscribe, give this episode a thumbs up, and be sure to come back next week for another episode. Until then, this is Duke Mtambo, and don't forget to do good always.